Yeah, we're live. It is 6:47. A little bit early. It's all good though. Tonight, what I want to talk about are camshafts. Excuse me. Camshafts. And this particular test is really on a 6-liter. This particular motor that you're seeing right now is an LY6, which means it's a rec port headed iron 6-liter, basically a truck motor, but good rec port headed version. And the benefit of that, for guys that don't know, the other 6-liter truck motors that people talk about a lot, LQ4 and the higher compression LQ9, both of those came with 317 heads. So they came with what some people would call the lesser of the cylinder heads available. But there would be no way to argue that a 317 head compares to any of the factory rec port heads in terms of performance. You could argue, oh, well, what about the 243 head that has a smaller chamber? Yeah, it has more compression than the later rec port heads did, but it just doesn't flow anywhere near as much. So a 317 head that flows the same as a 243 head, not in the running because it also shares a fairly big chamber, like a 70cc chamber. And these rec port heads do as well. And so that's one benefit that some of the cathedral port heads have smaller chambers. And so you can get, you can get added torque or added power from that. But when you have one head that flows 240 or 250 CFM and one that flows 300 or 310, one of them will support a lot more power. You might argue that on a stock motor or even a small cammed motor, that the gains that you get, the potential gains that you get from having a rec port headed version, not that great, because you're not utilizing what the cylinder heads have available. If you're only using, if you're making 500 horsepower, well, you don't need 600 horsepower heads. But the thing is, in most cases, even with small cams, you'll always make at least a little more power with the rec port heads than you will with the cathedral port heads. So this was an LY6, but that also meant that it started out life as a VVT motor. So it had variable cam on it. We didn't do any testing with that. We just took it off. And I just put a standard truck camshaft in it to start the testing off. And we'll show you here in just a minute. We'll show you some of the dyno results. But what we did was this particular comparison. Now I ran a lot of cams on this motor. We ran a sloppy stage 2, and we ran a bunch of BTR cams on it. The stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, I think stage 4 also. All the truck cams. I mean, this thing has been through the ringer, or had been through the ringer. It's also the one that I did all the big bang stuff on, where we made 1,500 plus horsepower with it. So this thing had been through a lot. It's run rec port heads, it's run cathedral port heads, it's run a variety of different intake manifolds. It's run, I'm sure, 20 camshafts and at least different headers and all kinds of things. But for this test, what we're going to concentrate on are 3 different cams, or 1, 2, 3 or 4 different cams. Just to kind of show you what happens when we put bigger cams in. I'm not recommending it, and you'll see, I'm not recommending any of these cams specifically. I'm just showing you that, hey, look, when you run a small stock 6-liter truck cam, like an LQ4, LQ9 kind of thing, here's kind of what it does. And then the other interesting thing is we put an LS3 camshaft in here, because I ran some LS3 testing with it too, because we could make this into a 6-liter kind of version of an LS3. And we ran the LS3 intake manifold and the truck version of that rec port intake manifold. They both did the same thing. But we ran the LS3 intake manifold, or rather the LS3 camshaft. And then we ran a bigger camshaft. In this case, it was a comp cam, like a 230 cam. So a big kind of cam that gets, that you can make lots of, let's say, peak power with. And they did, very well. They performed kind of the way that we would expect. And now that we've done lots and lots of this kind of testing, you can see, yeah, this is actually what it does. But so we'll run through the photos here and you guys can take a look. This is the LY6 with long, inch and 7/8 headers on it. It had the LY6 intake manifold and a 92 millimeter throttle body on it. It had the Mazir electric pump. We'd replaced the front cover and stuff because it didn't have the VVT stuff. It had the rec port heads, as we said. We started off with the factory kind of camshaft. We ended up, the big cam that we ended up putting in it was a 469, or that might even be a 459 comp cam. But, we could see that, well, for some reason the numbers are cut off. But what we see is this thing went from 440 horsepower, roughly 440, 445 horsepower. And then that's the green. So the green made the most torque down low. It's the smallest cam. So that's not really surprising at all. So we look, I can put my pointer here. So we look right up here. Hopefully you guys can see the cursor. It made more torque than everybody up to about 3,700 or so, 3,800. It made more torque than the LS3 cam all the way up to 4,500. The next one in red is the LS3 cam. Now, not surprisingly, and this happens a lot, if you take a look at the video I did where we tested basically all of the factory stock cams on a 5.3, you can see it does the same kind of thing. So we ran the LM7 camshaft, which makes the most low-speed power of all of them. It's the mildest camshaft. It's the 191 F50 camshaft. But then also the other ones, LS1, LS2, LS3, LS6, all the LS9, LS7, yada, 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 LSA, all of those. We ran all those camshafts, and this is kind of what they do. They do the better, more performance-oriented cam, and I would definitely call, in terms of the factory stuff, I would definitely call the LS3 a performance-oriented cam. Not quite as much power as an LS7 or an LS9, but the LS3 cam made good power, and makes more power than the truck, than the 6-liter truck camshaft does. Not surprising at all. The truck cam's better down low, the LS3 is better up top. That's part of how they get the LS3 motor to make, you know, it was rated at 435 horsepower, but it makes close to 500 the way that we tested, 490 anyway. So it does very well, but this is part of how that they do it, and they get it to make. So we stepped up from about 40 horsepower on the camshaft. We went from 440 to about 480 in this case. And then with the big camshaft, and there were other intermediate cams between us, but with the big camshaft, which was a 231 cam at 50 and 600 plus lift on a comp deal, we're up near 540 horsepower. So if you take a look at this, when we go from the stock cam up to the biggest, you know, if you put some sort of 235 cam or 230s or 230 plus camshaft in it, like a Summit Stage 4, a BTR LS3 Stage 4, all of those kinds of bigger camshafts, Cam Motion, Texas Speed, yada, yada, all of those people, you put a really big camshaft in there. And then if you compare it to a relatively small cam, like that stock 6-liter truck cam, you're looking at, we've got almost 100 horsepower difference between the cams. Now, it's not 100 horsepower everywhere. It's only 100 horsepower from peak to peak in this case. And actually more than that out at, you know, if you look at the difference at 6,500, it's you know, 130 or 40 horsepower. It's quite a bit, because the other camshaft, the stock 6-liter cam, which is designed for low speed power, is falling off after 50. It's making peak power, like, let's call it 5,400 RPM. So after that, it's on the downward side of the horsepower curve. So it's falling off, where the other one is just continuing to carry, making peak power out at about 6,500 RPM. And so it's doing very well. And this is what you expect from the big camshaft. But you can see the big camshaft made less low-speed power, certainly a lot less than the truck camshaft. And interestingly enough, not a whole bunch less than the LS3 camshaft, down at 3,000 RPM. We didn't run it lower than that. Had we run it lower than that, it would most certainly be below the LS3. But this is the other thing that I wanted to point out, and why this kind of testing is so interesting. And that's that if you take a look and compare these cams, depending on which stock cam you're comparing it to, will tell you what kind of gain you get. You know, you could look at this and go, oh, well, that cam is really good. It didn't really lose anything out to an LS3 camshaft down low, down 3,000. No, it didn't. But an LS3 cam is terrible down low. If you refer back to the factory camshaft comparison that I did, and then you look at an LS3 cam versus a truck cam or LS7 cam or a LM7 camshaft, the early truck camshaft, you'll see how bad it is at 3,000 RPM. I mean, it's down a lot. And again, they're trying to maximize power. They have a 6.2, which has more displacement and therefore can make more torque. They're not worried about the loss that they got with that camshaft, at least compared to the truck stuff. The truck stuff, they're trying to favor power production down low, which is why they do that with those kinds of camshafts and the longer runner intake manifolds and stuff. Although all of the factory car stuff all have long runner intakes, except for the supercharged stuff. All of that is fairly short runner, because they've got a package of supercharger under there. But they get all their low-speed power from boost. So don't cry for them. They're making all the low-speed power that they could probably put down. But this is an interesting thing. We saw similar deals with the LS6 camshaft and the LS2 camshaft, and even even to a slightly lesser extent the LS1 camshafts. But you know, these bigger stock camshafts don't do well down low. And the thing is, and we can look at this two ways. Well, if we don't have another stock cam to compare it to, we just have an aftermarket cam. We're going, hey, look, this aftermarket cam is like better everywhere. Yeah, that's because that stock one is really not very good down low. It's already really soft. But if that's all that you saw, or if some unscrupulous individual was trying to tell you, hey, look, this camshaft does better than, you know, is as good down low, and and so you might be tempted to think, oh, look, it made all of the good low speed power, and it makes a whole bunch of power on top. No, it doesn't really do that. Again, it's like the forced perspective photos that you see of a guy holding the giant fish, or I like watching the ones where they hold oh, look, this giant rattlesnake. No, you're standing 10 feet back because you got it on a stick and you're holding it right next to the lens, and so it looks big. That's not, I mean, it's a good sized snake, but it's not the 10-footer that you're telling people that it is. I remember getting a story from a relative about that. They're like, yeah, they found this snake that was like, it was 10 or 12 feet. And it was supposed to be a Western diamondback. Oh yes, like 10 or 12 feet. It's been eating rabbits and in the and cats or dogs or whatever. And near this, I think the story was it was near a golf course or something. And they're like, yeah, they showed a picture of it. It had 1-inch fangs. I'm like, yeah, that's like way bigger than a gaboon viper. It's not that. It can't be that. That would be a world record by several feet. So it's not that. I guarantee you. I said it's just it's on the internet, so it has to be true kind of thing. But the same kind of deal here. So I just want you to know that, hey, look, when we're comparing this, compare the right one to the right one. Compare you want to compare it to the thing that you have. So if you have an LR4 camshaft, an LM7 camshaft, so same an early 6-liter, or even a later 6-liter, which is slightly better, but slightly less, maybe lose a little bit down low, slightly better up top, but not a ton. But then if you go to these LS 1, 2, 3, 6 camshafts, and then the thing is on an LS7 or an LS9 camshaft where we get to compare this, they would be down even further. The LS3 is actually a little bit better down low than the LS9 or the LS7. They got really wide LSAs and stuff, and so they're not that great down low. But they do make more power on the top, so they actually charge pretty hard on the big end, which helps them work well. So, but at any rate, you can make good power with a big cam and a 6-liter. Not surprising. You got good cylinder heads, you got a good intake manifold. Throw a big camshaft in there, all of a sudden you look like a hero, and you're making lots of power. Untrue, Dennis, what's going on? Rico Suave, how much horsepower does an electric water pump free up on an LS engine? Probably a pretty good bit if you're also getting rid of the crank-driven fan and you're using electric fans. But I have videos up on, although I don't honestly, I have a video up on accessories, and we tested accessories on the engine dyno. The problem is that I don't think I did the fan test justice because we just couldn't keep it hot enough when we were testing it. We couldn't keep the clutch locked up. What I needed to do was lock up the clutch on it to see. But I think we did do a water pump test. But it's probably 5 or 10, I would think. How's everything going? Quinn, Eric, Daniel, how are we doing? How we doing? Winston, you didn't miss anything. Just me, talking, rambling on. Everything needs a manual transmission. Yeah, that's good. What do you have to say about gains from low boost turbo versus cam upgrade versus a torque converter? Personal opinion as a converter. You want the converter to do the best there? A cam upgrade is really hard to get if you're talking about really low speed power, like where a converter is going to show. But camshaft's not going to do that. A low boost turbo, the boost level has nothing to do with it, but the boost response will have something to do with that. So if you want the power gain to be at 2000 RPM, let's say that you have a stock converter and you want boost at 2000 RPM, you just have to size the turbo so it will do that. It can do that, and you can certainly do that with a positive displacement blower. The camshaft would be the worst thing that I would pick there. And depending on what RPM you want, maybe converter would be first. Eric, we cannot do a poll tonight. It goes today. Been a bum. Hope it's been better. Same-ish day. Today, I spent the day at DMV, so it was like super fun. I was getting my son's car registered. And so went in, waited in line several hours, got it all, the registration all taken care of, stuff. And they said, oh, yeah, it's been too long. Now you need a smog. So they sent me away and I went and got a smog. So I had to find a smog place that was open, got the smog done. The car's just all stock. So that wasn't really a problem. And then went back and I went up to at our DMV, we have to wait in line, go to an information desk. And then the information desk gives you like a number, a coded number, like a letter and a number. And so you have to wait for that to be called. So it's not just they're calling like, okay, now serving 995. It's like B17. It's like we're playing bingo in there. And so I went up to the information desk. I said, look, I did everything. I've already paid for it. All the paperwork's done. All that I have to do is show them that I have this smog check and the registration is done. I said, do I have to wait in line again? Yes. I'm like, oh, thanks. It's a good conversation. Thanks. Appreciate it. So then I had to wait in line again and do that. And then they're like, okay, here. And what would have been icing on the cake, which would have been awesome, would have been when I went up to, they finally called my number, my alphanumeric designation, and they called and went up there. If the person at the desk would have said, you know what, you really didn't have to wait in line. You could have just come right up here. That would have been awesome. But so that was part of my day. It was really fun. My wife likes catching small snakes in New England. What kind of snakes do you guys have in England? I'm curious. I'm certain garter snakes. Those are kind of all over. Have you tested any hawk cams? I have. I'm not familiar with those. So obviously no. Richard, the question is, say my hardware is capable of 600 horsepower and I need to make 300 to 350 flywheel horsepower. How would I do that? So you're saying you have a 600 horsepower motor and you want to detune it to 350? You could do that by taking away a bunch of timing and restricting the carburetor. Ever look at the Florida Python Challenge? Yeah, I've been to Florida already and went around out in the swamps. And I actually caught one Burmese python. It was a small one. But Jimmy and I just did it on our own. I just flew there and we just said, let's do a road trip down into Florida swamps and try to help the Floridians with these invasive species. And so I've done that. I didn't do the challenge though. That would be fun. Also, why do you have better boost response when the exhaust is hot? We have more heat energy in the turbo. How much horsepower do you think a stock pulley LSA will make alone? I don't know. Are you asking if you add the LSA onto a motor? It's going to depend on what motor you're adding it to. CJ, what's going on? You let the kids enjoy the glorious DMV for hours? No, everyone was at school. Well, my older son was at work, but my younger son was at school. Fan test is probably pretty fair because you rarely hear from the engine fan, but it gets the point across when it's engaged fully and when it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had some sort of indicator on it that I could data log while I'm driving. You know, I'd like to see how much time it spends like engaged fully versus not at all, and then where it, you know, the time that it spends in between those two. And just to see. Now serving R704 at window number 11. And that's it exactly. And the greatest thing is when I was there for the first time at DMV, I had a number, an alphanumeric designation, and I went in to see what they were doing, and they hadn't called any of that letter for about 15 minutes. I'm like, did you just leave the B's or the G's or whatever I was? Did you just leave those out? You're just not doing those anymore? As soon as I pick that one, you're just like, okay, Richard's here. We're not calling that. Everybody else gets punished. We're not calling that letter anymore. So yeah, it was fun. Richard, missed a live feed about big versus small blowers. What's never been discussed is the weird TorqueStorm brainchild, 2 small root screws versus a big blower. Why do you think something is unique about TorqueStorms? TorqueStorms are just centrifugal blowers. There's nothing else different about them. and having two of them would double the parasitic loss. But they're not roots blowers, they're not screw blowers, they're centrifugal blowers. I'm glad I live in Iowa. I could probably pay mine online, but it's a car that we bought, so I had to go in. On eBay turbos, it's the turbine wheel and the turbine AR that matters more than the compressor. Matters for what? What are you talking about? If you're saying universally matters, no, that's not the case. For the fan conversion, I would say it depends on the application, cruiser, off-road, lots of water crossing. I personally, on the truck, and I was told this by the guys, by Don at Nazir, he said he recommended not using an electric water pump for like towing and stuff like that. He said, I wouldn't do it. Good evening, Richard. I got my engine plus trans ready for installation in the car tomorrow. Intake headers and wiring harness all sitting with each other. Nice. Good to be organized. Still chasing leaks in my junk. I've got the snail functioning, I guess, although the leaks are driving me insane. Trans lines, fuel lines, vacuum radiator, and of course, the odd oval throttle body. Eastern Diamondbacks in Florida get up to 12 feet. I haven't seen anything that's that size, but Eastern Diamondbacks definitely get bigger than Western Diamondbacks. It's an ITB setup for the car. It's quite a bit too much power for the weight for roadworthy. I upgraded from the unknown turbo on the 4.3 liter, and now I'm running a GT3582 with big power gains. 14 to 16 PSI is awesome. I made a few pulls at 23 to 24 PSI. Nice. Oh, 14 to 16 PSI is awesome. Yeah, okay, I get it. but 23 to 24 was even better. That turbo should easily support the 4.3 there. Literally everything was leaking. Well, at least you're consistent. Do you like a mother thumper cam and a 372 dart block? What is that, a small block Chevy or what is it? Is it like a dart block deal? Oh yeah, dart deal. That's what Westech has. I don't know if they've ever run a mother thumper cam in there. It should sound good. When does work begin on the LS Fox body? It's already begun. We're already building the motor. Tony, 6-liter Gen 4. Let's see. Scroll back, Tony. Oh, I don't know. I have no idea what a. I don't know what a stock pulley is. I don't know how much boost they make stock. I would have to go back and look at some of the Kenny Bell tests that we did, because that's the only time I've ever seen. I think that was an LSA motor in a ZL1 Camaro. And so I think I probably have some chassis dyno stuff from that. I have to go look at stories for that because I don't have any of the actual data, I don't think. So I'd have to go see what kind of boost they made stock and where they were for power. I think I want to say it was around 550 or something like that. Quinn, I don't know. I just know that when it gets hotter, it's better. What's your go-to preload on stock LS lifters when you swap cams? Is there a magic number you like to shoot for? No, I don't adjust. I don't normally change push rods. As long as it's between, a quarter to a half a turn of preload, and then up to and including 1.5 turns, it's okay. But if I had my ideal, I think between 3/4 and 1 full turn. Eastern Diamondbacks get up to 12 feet long. I've personally seen a 9-footer. Yeah. I would like, what is the current world record for Eastern Diamondbacks? Eastern Diamondback is a large rattlesnake. One specimen in 1946 measured 7.8 feet in length and weighed 34 pounds. Somebody, Ross Allen offered rewards for anything dead or alive over 8 feet. Nobody reclaimed the rewards, although he did get a lot of 7-footers. Specimens are rarely found over 6 feet in length. So that's the information I have for Eastern Diamondbacks. If you saw a 9-footer, you should have grabbed it because it would have been a world record. I'm building a new burnout car with an LQ9 and Cadillac XLR 122 and ended up catching up a few old videos. Doesn't surprise me, you already got them uploaded. Yeah, we did run the Cadillac blower on a couple of things with those adapters that the guys ran. This is my opinion for the best turbo truck for stock LS. What would happen if you told DMV I'm saving the racing world and removed all emissions equipment? DMV wouldn't care about that. They have no influence on that. LS7 cell lifters have 200 thousandths plunger depth. I set my preload to 75. Okay. Yeah, I don't go by that. I mean, I could multiply out the number of turns and then how much that equates to. But the way that I remember it is effective for me because the way that I do it is the way that I'm installing the rockers anyway. So I do it every time basically I install something. Richard, I was going to make a Y pipe for my crossover pipe for the turbo. Is there any benefit making the tubes equal length from manifolds to the Y, or does a turbo placement only matter? I think that would be kind of hard to do unless you mounted the turbo in the center. I don't think you should worry about it. None of the turbo things that I've ever done are equal length. Let's go to DMV. I always take a nice little scenic drive to the rural location, never a line. Super nice ladies, worth the hour wait. Yeah, if you have a good one, you can go out there and the country stores baked goods. There you go, man. I had a 303 cam for a 30 over bore on what if you had a 303 cam for a 30 over bore on a 302? You'd be all set, right? Do you have any cam tests for the low buck truck on a 6-liter? Yes. Yeah, we just ran both the low buck truck and the truck plus on a 6-liter LQ4. And I've also run it on the 6-liter LY6. For snake catching, do you follow Fishing Garrett? I don't know if a link works, but gators or swamp puppies. Yeah, I have seen that. We did get to see when I was in Florida, we got to see a lot of gators. We got to see them. All the ones that we saw were at night. We didn't see any during the day. When we were driving, we could sometimes see them. Go driving down the freeway, and we look over and stuff. We could occasionally see one or two. But when we went out looking for snakes during the day, mostly we were just doing a recon to find good places to come at night. But when we came back to the same places at night and looked into the water at night, there were lots of gators there. It's pretty cool. Swamp puppies. I knew the torque terms are centrifugal, but once I saw their twin kit, I was like, why would anyone do that? besides show 2 M122s versus an 871 was my theory. I never run 2 superchargers. Turbos are better. No, you can run two of anything. You can run 2 turbos, 2 blowers, or whatever. And 2 blowers obviously would work. The reason that they did it is because they want that adds twice the horsepower potential. So if you have one supercharger that's good for, let's say, 700 or 800 horsepower, but you want to make 1500, then you just add another one of those. Same thing with turbos. If you have a turbo that's 700 or 800 horsepower, and you have 2 of them, now you got 1600 horsepower worth of power. Can you recommend a good off-the-shelf cam for a street-driven 408 that will potentially be turboed? No 85. We'll be looking for an AFR 205 RPM air gap 500 horsepower. I still think that on a Windsor, I still think that something like that Comp Extreme Energy 274 cam is a really good go-to, even on a 408. You could go a little bit bigger than that, but on turbos, there's no reason to do that because you can make more power than you would want with whatever turbo or turbos you're going to run. That's the great thing about Boost. eBay turbos sellers post a lot of specs such as compressor, wheel size, turbine wheel, AR turbine, which specs for daily driven 302 redline under 5,000 RPM. So Cam, you just tell me how much power you want to make, and then I'll tell you what turbo you should get. It's a lot easier that way. I don't care to run them as hot as factory suggested or wants, especially my Gen 2 LT1 205 to 210 is too hot for my liking. I have 160 degree thermostat and everything, and it only makes heater. The reason that they're running them so hot is for emissions. The emissions are lowered when you're doing that, and the fuel mileage is a lot better when you have it at a hotter temperature. Sloppy Mechanics has brought Torque Storm back into the light. I don't think that came from Matt. I think Matt also did some Torque Storm stuff, but Torque Storm is doing really well, I think. Bias TV, this is where I'm at. Okay. I just came here to say thanks for all the videos and data oriented. Happy to help John. Torque Storm makes 1 blower size instead of re-engineering a budget blower again. They just made 2 times a blower. I think that now they have multiple sizes. 4302, 30 over, 3303 cam, 66 Mustang 4-barrel intake, Holly 600 manual choking GT40P heads ported out. Okay, all that's good. I think you could pick a better intake manifold than a factory 66 Mustang 4-barrel intake, unless you want it to have that kind of look. VGT for non-diesel applications. They've used them before on factory stuff. The VGT stuff, the problem is that it just doesn't work for very long. Some boats have 2 screw blowers. Yeah, Whipple had a dual blower kit for big blocks for quite a while. Richard, I have your low buck truck cam and my 6.2 Escalade. What size torque converter would you personally go with? All-wheel drive and Vortex supercharger. You can use a stock one just fine on that size motor with that cam. A converter will definitely help, like a 2500 or something. That will always help, even with a stock cam, but it's not required with that low buck truck camshaft on a 6.2. When building a 408 LS stroker, what piston should I look for? Can I use a 4030? You can't use an LS piston in that. In your Ford, you have to get a Ford piston, and there are lots of good ones. JE has stuff. Probably Summit has stuff too, I think. Racetech has some. Wiseco has some. Bullet has some. I've seen what looked like 5 to 6 foot king snakes in Florida. I'm almost not happy. I was hiding from the sun under her door of the SUV. A 6 foot king snake would be unusual. It'd be really, really big. But the snakes that do get that big are gopher snakes and bull snakes can get that big. The rat snakes can get that big. The indigos get that big. All right, Eric, we'll see you, man. Moonshine Harley had a video the other day talking about VVT cams and retrofitting them to older model Harleys. Interesting idea for controlling high power builds. Yeah, and the thought behind that is that if you take a look at this thing, take a look at these power curves and go, you know what I want is I want a cam that gives me all the high end power here and all the low end power here. A VVT cam is not going to give you that. A VVT cam might add, like if you chose a VVT cam, a version of the big cam there, and then you could advance it down low to get more low speed power, that might work. The problem is that you need a lot of piston to valve clearance in order to do that, because it'd be easier actually for you to have a smaller cam and then retard it to get more power at the top, because you don't have to worry about piston to valve clearance nearly as much. Certainly not on the intake. What size turbo would you recommend for a 6.3 LS to make 1,000 horsepower? We will have a turbo for that, I think, in the next week or two. When running the Holley HP, have you ever played around with injector end angle? I don't let Holley take the wheel. I don't ever run in closed loop. I always run in open loop. We have tried injector timing, if that's what you're talking about, but I don't know what, I'm not familiar with end angle. I'm not familiar with that designation. What size turbo would you recommend for twins on a 6.3 LS? Well, you would recommend two that make 500 or more each. Not all DMVs are equal. I drive 1 hour further for the good one. In and out 15 minutes. Yeah, if you can go find a small one somewhere where not a lot of people go, that's good. What's the best way to get a cam recommendation? Building a 400 small block, AFR 195s. I'd like to go with a solid roller. I'll have E85, single 4-barrel 950, and high compression. And so what kind of power are you trying to make, and what RPM range are you trying to run? Four-speed clutch car. Yeah, twin GT35s would be fine. What's the chattering noise? You guys might hear the frogs that are in the background. Stock 302 in an F-150, which turbo for 300 wheel horsepower? We have one for that that I need to talk about. It's, with ring gap, yeah. 300 wheel horsepower is really easy. Yes, Richard, similar about 2 years ago, turbocharger off a school bus with a Navistar International. Yeah, the problem with a diesel turbo is a diesel turbo is not designed to run, it's not designed to make a lot of power. Diesel engines don't, particularly factory ones, don't make a lot of power. They make a lot of torque, but they don't have a lot of RPM, so they don't make a lot of power. So the turbo isn't sized to make like 600, 700, 800 or 1,000 horsepower. It's designed to make 300 or 400, and that's not what most gas engines want. K-swap 3rd gen Camaro with rammer hood. What turbo would make it light the tires up in second without spinning the band on my 700 R4? When you're saying K-swap, does that mean you have a K-series Honda swapped into a Camaro? I was unaware of fuel mileage benefits of running hot. Heater gets only warm, not hot, and all emission stuff is MIA. Yeah, the car will get better fuel mileage when it's hot. It gets better fuel mileage when the motor is hot, and also gets better fuel mileage when the air going into the motor is hot. Little truck works good for a 5.3. I got a stock converter, and I do not have a truck. There you go. It would be impossible to even make that low of a power level. Asking about building LS 408 stroker, not a Ford. Oh, okay. That makes more sense. I thought it was a Ford. LQ9 with ported 799 head, sloppy stage 3 cam, and a Cadillac 122. I'm not sure the boost it will make, but any ideas? I don't know how much power that blower with the adapters and everything. I don't know what that will support. I don't know what pulleys you have on there and stuff. So it's hard to guess with the with that setup on there. My guess is you could limit that blower out with that LQ9 with that camshaft and ported heads on it. You could get all that blower will do. Can I build a 402-inch Ford big blocker LS? Yes. Could have been a different snake. I'm no expert. I was just getting, without getting too close to it, my luck would have been a moccasin. Yeah, a moccasin won't get that. It won't get that big. Luckily, they're smaller and thick. How far can I push the M122? I don't know how. Is it just a stock one? I don't know how much you can pulley it. But like I said, if an LQ9 with ported 799 heads and sloppy stage 3 is going to be could be mid 500 level power. And so if that blower, I don't know how much more that blower is going to support with the adapters and everything. I agree with Colt. 300 horsepower from a 302 should be channeled with NA mods. Yeah, that's hardly anything. That's a cam and intake manifold and stuff. That's not really that hard. 600 horsepower, 7,500 from a 400-inch motor. $1.5. I'm thinking that you're going to need like a 264, 272 kind of solid roller cam, and it's probably going to be 700 or more lift. M90 with turbos off a Mazda 3 doing compound boost and my 305 Crossfire Ram Air 3rd gen. That's what you're doing? That's a lot of stuff. Yeah, we got frogs in we have a creek back behind us, and then we also have a house that's next door that has an abandoned pool, basically, has frogs in it. I don't know why all the raccoons and stuff are not eating all the frogs. Yeah, turbo LS, at which point should you switch from a T4 to a T6 turbo exhaust housing? Are you trying to max out the turbo and you're limited now by what you think is back pressure? Because until that happens, you don't need to worry about it. Would a single GTX 3582 be enough for an LS1? It depends on what power level you're trying to get to. What benefit is there to running 2 superchargers instead of just getting a bigger one? The benefit for the people that were trying to do it, that had done it, were because a bigger one wasn't available. That's why they had to put 2 of them together. And also, twin blowers look cooler. Otherwise, there's not a benefit. Some of the school buses I worked on 2 years ago, I saw 40 pounds of boost. Watching with Cummins Insight laptop software used for troubleshooting. No idea on CFM. Yeah, but you could make 40 pounds of boost at 2,500 RPM, and that's not very much power. We see that all the time. And I'm not saying people can't take those turbos off and run 2 of them and run them on gas motors. I'm just saying that a motor that makes 400 horsepower in turbocharged diesel form it doesn't have a turbo on it that can then go to 1,000 horsepower. That's not the way that they work. My VGT is based off the DPS turbinator and an S98 T6 divided. One bank goes into each scroll. Turbine housing air varies between 0.6 and 1.5. Opens fully at 20. So you already have that running. So if you already have that running and you're working, why are you asking questions about it? You should be telling us information about it. There are no diesel turbos or only turbos that pump air. They're just sized for different things. For the guy detuning his motor, even though the throttle goes both ways, he might be in a class where they dyno test it. It was what I'm thinking, because that is a thing for some class racing. where they put it on a chassis dyno, and so he has to be able to detune it, I'm thinking. Modern diesels use electronic wastegates. 264, 270, 700 lift, got it. Yeah, and then it's going to be like 100 and, I don't know, 7 or 8 LSA, probably something like that. So with the LS408, what pistons will not run into any clearance issues with the block or the stock head? You need a piston that, if the clearance issue that you're talking about is piston to valve clearance, you just need pistons that have valve reliefs in them. And then you need to pick the piston based on the bore size and the rod length, and then also the static compression that you want. So do you want a dish piston for depending on what size chamber you have? Do you want a flat top piston? You're probably not going to want a dome piston. That would be very unusual for an LS. Does anybody know what size small block Chevy TBI heads are? I was told in our last conversation that they were 64 cc's. I didn't think that they were, but maybe they are. I actually have a custom air gap riser intake for the Cadillac, which crosses the ports from side to side. Cross country skids for kids USA burnout car. Okay. An air gap riser intake. So when they crisscross, do they come up then into some kind of open plenum that you have the blower sitting on, like a tunnel ram kind of thing, a crisscross applesauce tunnel ram? That would be better. V-band turbo versus T4 and T6. We're going to do some testing on turbos that we have. That's going to be a T4 versus a, yeah, it's a T4 versus a V-band, but not a T6. I'm using the turbo now, so I don't want to increase compression when I get some AFR or get skip white heads. Well, I don't think you're going to get something smaller than 64 cc's with AFR or skip white. I know that you can get bigger ones than that. Just bought the Gen 5 truck Norris for my Cadillac. There you go. School buses make crazy torque. Yeah, they are very torquey. There's no doubt about that. If you want to tow something, a diesel engine is the way to go. Bill saying the TBI heads are, he's confirmed that they are 64 cc's. Aaron, what's going on? Burnout car is a 2000 Grand Marquis with a 40s Ford pickup front end, 64 Barracuda cab, which is chopped and widened, and a 50s Dodge pickup bed. Also traded the car for an LQ9. There you go. Wouldn't increasing the stroke to 4 inches also bring the piston up higher in the bore? How would not want to kiss the head? It doesn't do that because you buy a stroker kit. So you buy a crank, rod, and piston assembly that are designed to be a 4-inch stroke, and it's going to be a 6/125 rod. And what they do is they change the pin position in the piston so that the piston doesn't come up farther than the deck surface. They have all of that scienced out. If you were just to put a 4-inch stroke and try to attach your stock piston and rod in there, then it will come out, but that's not what you're doing. But they have goofy high swirl intake runners. Seen a few of your LS intake tests where you've revved them well into 7,000 on stock internals. Have you ever run into issues with too much RPM on stock LS bottom ends? Well, the thing that I can tell you is that the internals, like the bottom end stuff, is not the problem. RPM problems are valve train related. So that's not an issue. We have that L33 that we have has 600 pulls on it, and it has lots and lots of, more than 100 at 7,700 RPM. And it came from the wrecking yard that way. I didn't do anything to it, to the bottom end anyways. We have put heads and cam and intake manifold on it that allow us to do that. but the bottom end is still the way that it came out of the yard. You said you don't want to do a big bang 4.3 liter because you can't find aluminum heads, but wouldn't that kind of defeat the purpose of the test? Curious why that particular is the restricting factor. It doesn't defeat the purpose of the test. If you look at every big bang that I've done, every one of them has gotten heads, cam, and intake manifold. And they will continue to do that because we don't want to just do a stock motor. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not the goal of this. For me, the goal, the way that the Big Bang originally started is people were saying you can't run more than, pick a number, 10 pounds of boost with a stock LS motor because they'll break, because the rods are powdered metal or the pistons are cast or whatever the deal is. You can't do it, they'll break. I'm like, that they don't know that. They don't care about that. That's not a thing. And so I decided to find out what the strength of the stock short block was, minus putting ring gap in it, what the strength of that was. I don't care about the heads and the cam and intake manifold, because when I decided to figure out what the strength of that was, I wanted to find, you're trying to find a horsepower number, basically, or torque number, in this case, probably more aptly. And so in order to do that, I didn't want to just run a bunch of boost on a stock motor. What I wanted to do was we wanted to have a big number at whatever boost level that we were putting in there, how much ever boost it would take, how much ever power it would take, and with some attending boost number. But I didn't want to put 40 or 50 pounds in it. I wanted to put 25 or 30 pounds in it, but still have it be a really big number. So that's exactly what we did. So we put good heads on them. We put a good camshaft in it, put a good intake manifold on all of the ones that we've done. And I want to do that with a 4.3 also, if I was going to do that. Common mistake is diesels make more torque than gas engines, and they don't just make more boost. NA diesels just make less torque. So I need to buy a dedicated kit. Yeah, you can't just add a stroke or crank. You have to get it's a whole kit. Diesels have better efficiency numbers. That's why they're used in big trucks. I'm trying to get anything smaller. I will lean on the turbo to make all the power I need, or the rest of the car will handle for that matter. Just want a safety margin. Yep. Beauty of diesel is octane. It's not a factor. Any recommendations on kits? Can I even piecemeal a kit together for cheaper? Probably not. You shouldn't try to beat the system. You should buy something that somebody has that's all together. It's probably not. It's probably going to be cheaper that way, anyways. Like I said, look for all the ones that I told you: K1 and Wiseco and Race Tech and Summit. Just look for 408 stroker kits at Summit, and they'll probably list a whole bunch of different ones. Crisscross applesauce M122 with dual flanges on the top side, basically just aluminum rectangle tubing. Blower has some cooling mods, and hoping the longer runner air gap may also lower temperatures. Yeah, the air gap's not going to do that, because the what's going to happen is, and do you still have the intercooler underneath the 122? The temperature is going to be a function of the boost, and then minus whatever you can do with the intercooler. Big Bang 5.2, be nice to have 5.2 or 5.9 aluminum heads. When was the first turbo made? I think, is that Schweitzer that did that way back? Old diesels last 2 million miles. First successful turbos were in the 20s. If you ever drove one of those old trucks with 2 million miles on the clock, you'd know why. They don't make enough power to hurt themselves. Yeah. Build the turbo with turbine divorced from the compressor with a longer, thin, fluided shaft drive to keep almost all the heat away and see what happens. So you're worried about heat transferring from the hot side to the cold side? You are racing 1.7 million miles on a C15 Caterpillar that I ran. And sending a ton of people to the channel. Thank you very much. We get a lot of people asking for opinions on engine setups. I tell them your channel is the encyclopedia. Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate the help with my leaking head bolts on the Texas Speedheads I had a couple years and didn't even get to thank you. Did it work, Matt? Oh, Aaron, are there aluminum heads for that? Is that Does Edelbrock have them, or does Speedmaster have them? I've proven so many people wrong with my boosted spider injection 4.3 liter Vortec, 35,000 miles. It's boosted never less than 10 pounds all the way to 24 with only 30 gap and MLS gaskets. Does it have a different, does it have a different cam in it? And then what injectors are you using on your spider assembly? Heat of compression is much greater than the heat transfer. Yeah, I think that the heat transfer thing is not a thing. I think that that's like the heat transfer of a tube at wide open throttle. I don't think that that's, I think it'd be hardly measurable. If you look at mid-sized boats and compare gas versus diesel, the diesels don't last as long as the gas engines, are worth 3 to 4 times more money when they go boom. Cadillac 122 still has a heat exchanger on the top. Okay. Do you know what a valve cover seal is made of? Does anybody know? Is it? It's not. They're not Viton or anything, are they? But they got to be something more than rubber. It's not Boone end. What does anybody know? Want to make more torque down low with a 408? When should I be looking to close my intake valve? That's not a question. You got to tell me what combination you have, and then I'll tell you how to change it. And you got to tell me where you want more power. Looking to install a sloppy stage 2 in an LQ4 for a weekend car, turbo 400. You think better flowing aftermarket heads would be worth the extra money if not regularly over 6,000 RPM? No, I don't think so. I think you'd be better off just doing stuff to yours, just porting them. Or you could also look into putting bigger valves in your 862 heads. Boosted 4.3 has a stock cam and decap spider injectors. CJ, can you send me a photo of, do you have any photos of those? I'd like to see what they look like. I was actually unable to complete the project and moved on in life. I'm sure you were spot on with your advice when I took the engine apart. Professionally built stroker LS engine. It did not have, okay, sealant on the bolt, so I didn't think it was necessary. Eddie makes a bolt-on Magnum aluminum head. Speedmaster LA aluminum will work. You have to use a stainless steel shaft, rocker mounts, okay, because of the oiling. I did a few burnouts too with Mack trucks. Valve covers are they silicone? Okay. Cork, yeah, it's been a while since that. Like to see more stuff on the 4.3. I want to put the M90 on the 4.3. Richard, when you're doing head gaskets on LS engines, do you reuse MLS gaskets? Yeah. Especially if I have put together a new motor and then we're running, like when we did head tests, for instance, so we did 10 or 12 or whatever sets of heads, we use the same head gaskets on all of them because they only have like 6 pulls on them or whatever, and we take them off. And so they don't hurt anything. I don't like to reuse really high mileage factory MLS gaskets because when you take them off, when you take the head off, you know, the thing just like accordions and separates and it pulls a bunch of the sealer and stuff off of that. You probably could put it back on. It probably would be fine. I think Matt has reused those before. I don't like doing that. I like putting a new one on. After I put a new one on, I would have no problem reusing it a bunch of times. And the gasket thicknesses for most of the stuff that we use is either like a 41 or a 53. And you can get them different. You can get them custom made for whatever you want. But those are the two that we use for the Felpro stuff. The Rock makes a bolt-on head for the Magnum, though any of the LA aluminum heads like Speedmaster will work. You have to use the shaft mount rockers that oil through the push rods. Got a 502 Marine Gen 6 long block, 430 over. We're setting up as a car engine, or just sell it and buy something different. Pay $600 for the long block. No, that's a good. A 502 is a good stout deal. If it's a 502 Marine motor, is it an aluminum headed one? Cork is my name. The updated spider injectors had a real injector in the intake track, not like the poppet nozzles. That's what I was asking. I thought that he was saying, though, that he decapped the spider ones, and I didn't know if he was just decapping the standard style. I wanted to see if there was something new that I hadn't seen. There's lots. I'll swap a newer LS 4.3 into my 93 S10 and add the M90 to that. Still badge as a 4.3. So you want to do the LV1 or LV3? That's actually LT based. An LS3 from a 5th gen Camaro, and I'm going to rebuild it. Put in a big cam. What's the most important thing to upgrade on the bottom end? You don't have to upgrade anything on the bottom end. If you want to put a really big cam in it, the one thing that you should look at is you need to look at a piston that has more valve relief or a valve relief in it, so that you can put more camshaft in it, so you have more piston to valve clearance. Oh, we're already at an hour, man. Got all kinds of problems with the poppet nozzles. Yeah, I had heard that. LT, yeah, the LV1 and LV3 are direct injected. They're not port injected. They are DIs. Lloyd Elliott in Texas, port in my heads. Have you ever heard of him? I have. I have here, actually. People have told me about him. I've never worked with him or seen any of his stuff, but people have told me that he does really good stuff, particularly the LT1 stuff they were saying. Dave Fiskus has some high 4-digit 4.3s in drag cars, one in a Grand National, then he put one in a Fox. There's some weight advantage of running a V6, and it says factory GM in the rules. Oh, your 502 has iron heads on. Okay, I've got a set of 330 CFM aluminum heads. I could use that. It's all forged and internals are new. I want to use a different cam. Will be a good cam to make 550 to 600 on a 502. That camshaft that I run in a lot of stuff is pretty good. That BR, it's like a 252 or 255, 262 cam. That one works pretty good. Sorry, I'm off subject. No, there's no subject. This is just question and answer now. So you can ask about Bigfoot. We don't care, man. Whatever you want. Yeah, but if you're tapping for oil, get it off either the back of the block where you have an oil sending unit. Sometimes it's on the Gen 4 stuff. It's on the lifter valley cover. Or it's in the back of the block on the others, on the Gen 3 stuff. Or you can get it from the side. There's a side plate, and people make these. They make a plate with a fitting on it that goes right above where the oil filter is on the pan. They're the newer version spider injectors. So just like a regular injector then, right? I've got miles on to prove it, all kinds of videos on Facebook Reels abusing it. Cool. It'd be 10-to-1 with aluminum heads. Yeah, a 10-to-1 502 would be good. That'd be like a lot of the 496s that I built. So you certainly can get 600 or more with that. My cars make a 700 wheel horsepower, and I stroked it out to a 416. How much horsepower would I expecting to gain? Are you doing that? Are you making 700 wheel horsepower with a turbo or a blower? What are you doing it with? It would be easier to calculate if we knew what it was making NA, if it's turbo or supercharged. So we got 1 more minute left, so you better get your question in. Otherwise, talk to the hand. Uh, 76 millimeter torque storm. I don't know how much more power that torque storm has. A 4.3 liter Vortec on 2003-02 has the remote oil filter mount, easy for oil feed to the turbo. On a Vortec 350, I don't see why you can't drill out the factory intake lower and put a regular injector and rail on it and put an M90 supercharger, and away you go. Drill out the factory lower intake, put a regular injector and rail. maybe I'm not picturing. Are you talking about just putting an adapter plate on top of the lower manifold on a EFI Vortec 350? Hard drive frogs are back. Those are actually frogs. Yeah, they're very loud. They are very, very loud. And on that note, it is time to go. So we had good times, good times. Why am I picturing chattering teeth? Wind up toy. Do you prefer in tune pounds an hour or VE on the Holly? I think ours is in pounds. And I don't even think about it in that way. I don't look at that. I don't look at it. It's this much fuel flow for this much horsepower. I don't look at it like that at all. What I do is we usually start with some known mat because I've got a bunch of them, and we put it in there, and then we adjust the whatever fuel we have, whatever injector size we have, and then we start out by having it be rich. And then I do it for me, the fastest way to do it, and I haven't seen anybody do it faster than this because I'm trying to maximize the time on the dyno, is I just do it in clicks. If I would like, we do a load in, and they go, okay, it's at 10.6. Oh, that we need to take away 8. And I'd take away 8. And then it's right in the mid 11s. and that's what I do for everything. So I'm not even looking at what that number is. I don't even care. It doesn't matter to me. All I do is then we'll make a short pull. Like if we get it, okay, we loaded at 3,000, that's fine. We loaded at 4,000, that's fine. 5, we adjust it or whatever. And then I can make a sweep. And then we make a sweep with no timing in it. We make a sweep from like, let's say 3,000 to 5,000. We go, okay, well, it's a little rich here. It's a little lean here, whatever. And I go to the thing, okay, here. This is mine. I take away 4 clicks. I add 2 clicks and take away 4 clicks, whatever. And then it's all flat. And then that's it. Like I don't ever even read what that number is or how it relates to power. All I care about is that because I'm watching the air fuel meter as we're making the pull. I'm watching that. Okay, if it's a boosted motor, I want it to be like 11.5 to 1. If it's 11.7, that's fine. If it's 11.3, that's fine. I would go adjust it maybe for the final run. But anywhere in there, it allows me to go, okay, I've made the run from 3,000 to 5,000. Now I can go to 6, and then I can go to 7 or wherever we're going to go to and make that pull. I start adding timing. And if, like I said, if it's 11.5 and one of them is 11.6 and one of them is 11.4 or whatever, it doesn't make any difference because that's not going to change the power at all. I just make it so that it's in the safe range for what I'm doing. Any chance you can test a wet nitrous kit on a gas or E85 engine, but use propane as the fuel for the wet nitrous? I'm not going to do that. We don't have the ability to use propane like that. Anyone had any luck with max speeding rods? I don't think I've ever used their rods. Be cool to use propane with the wet nitrous kit since it can help with a maxed out gasoline pump and injector. Do it liquid like the nitrous. Just wanted to say thanks for all the information. What pressure is propane under? It's only 200 psi. We'd really have to jet up to get the fueling. We really have to supply a lot of extra instead of it being 1,000 psi. You just pump up that bottle pressure. Are the propane bottles that we get for the barbecues, is that liquid? BTR used to offer propane injection and nitrous for Vipers. Brian Tooley Racing did? That would be news to me. Nick, happy to help. Big social media sites have really turned themselves into brain acid. Only use Facebook for Marketplace now and the odd group. They're all liquid. Okay. Liquid propane octane. Octane rating between 104 and 112. Okay, well that'll be good. That might actually be good then, right? BTR Viper propane kit. Yeah, it must be a different company. I don't think Brian ever did that. Not that I know of. We've never talked about that. So if the propane, so here's the final question for you guys to think about. If the propane is at we can heat the bottle up with the bottle heater that we have for nitrous. That's not a problem. I wouldn't do that though. We would just try it and see what happens. But the question is, here's the thing to think about. Here's the math question. We normally run nitrous at near 1,000 psi. Let's say might even be 1,100. But if we had jetting where we were running 1,000 psi and now we have 200 psi, would we have to somehow try to make it 5 times the amount of fuel flow? And we do that by making the jetting 5 times as big. Does it work like that? The answer is no. But that's what we'd have to do, though. We'd have to get enough so that, and then I don't know what the stoic value of propane is. We'd have to figure that out. Although if we had the way that we're using our meter, it would just continue to read the same. I'm just looking stuff up. Have to consider BTU energy equivalent to propane. I think we just run 5 jets with 5 propane tanks to make 1,000 psi. Oh, just start adding them all together. If you get gaseous nitrous in your lines, you run rich. Think about if your propane does that. What's the surface tension of that molecule that affects flow? I think you just run 5 jets with 5 propane tanks. You consider the BTU propane stoic is not far away from petroleum. Just asking for nitrous and propane together, just like gas and nitrous. Gas is only injected at 60 psi. Well, our gas normally is injected at 7 psi. Oh, that's right. You're right, Travis. I was not thinking about that correctly. I was comparing it to the nitrous. We're not doing that. So actually, at 200 psi, we would have to reduce the amount. Sounds like a bad idea. See Richard doing propane videos. I've been wanting to run a propane thing for a long time. In fact, the gentleman I have that doesn't live too far away from me, I've been over to his house a few times, that has done lots of cool stuff. He had one running on propane. I think I have a video up of his motor just started and idled it on propane. So he has some propane mixers and stuff, and we were talking about doing something with it. Better keep it liquid. King of the Hill style. Yep. Ask Hank. Propane needs a gas fire and a regulator. I sell propane and propane accessories. Propane will stay liquid without a gasifier. Specific energy. Need a flashback arrestor when feeding propane. This all sounds like a lot of stuff. Fuel equals gasoline. Pressed enter. See the layout of a propane forklift. I think that Westex forklift is a propane one. And on that note, see, that'll be something for us to talk about next time, right? On that note, it is time to go. I will see you guys all later.